Okay, so I just wanted to kick us off by saying, but I just kind of introduce myself. I'm Mark Miodownik. I'm a materials engineer from UCL. I got into sort of interacting with the public around science and engineering about 15 years ago. Those were the days, so many of you will remember them, where that was a complete rarity, that anyone who stepped outside the department and put their head above the parapet was obviously not very good at science engineering. That was de facto obvious by the fact that they were in the media, and that you should disbelieve anything, and all your colleagues would basically say, oh my God, he's terrible. Anyway, the whole culture of universities and science departments and companies has changed now. In the last 10 years, it's unbelievable in my view, and I just welcome the change. But that community that we now have, that interaction between MPs and people on the committees in Parliament and the media, the Radio 4 and live TV and Channel 4, all of those connections that we now have as a community, and I'm hoping that, I know there's lots of people in here who've got loads of those, people who and today the idea is for you to get more of them if you want to join that community. That is strong because of those connections, and we have to welcome people in and make more connections and meet more like this. So that's, number one, that's the reason for today. Two is that we live in a very perilous time. Actually, there's a lot of fake news going around. There's a lot of, in my view, irrationality about decision making, and probably you all agree. And our community has to stand up and be counted. And the way to do that is to talk to policymakers and talk to the media and have our voices heard. And that, again, is part of today. Like, how do we do that better? What should we do? So I'm just trying to also just tweak your brains and things to talk about, because I'm going to hand over to the panel in a minute and ask them what they think about these things. And then the third thing, the very brief thing, and I know Mikey's feeling that I'm talking too long, and that probably is true, but I'm sort of getting your brain set, aren't I, is, in my view, and this is just my view, the biggest problem facing us is the diversity of representation of the science and engineering community. It's just so monolithic, and it's just not diverse enough. And we will not be credible going forward if we do not make it more diverse. It's, in my view, our number one priority to be credible. Okay, so how do we do that? Yeah, well, hand over to a panel member.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's first of all fight. So we know you now. Mark, we don't really know. We know a bit about you, but we know a little bit what you've got to say. Let's find out who everybody is first. There's so much in those first few sentences that I'm sure people will want to unpick. But let's just find out who everybody is. So if those panelists and even people that have just want to come and sit in the front seats would like to introduce themselves, I'm going to go around and start off. Just say who you are and...
Okay, I'm Rachel Williams. I'm from the University of Liverpool. I'm a professor of ophthalmic bioengineering. So a lot of what I do is I'm an engineer, but I'm based in the Faculty of Medicine for Health and Life Sciences. And so I spend my time trying to talk to clinicians and work at this interface between engineering and medicine. It's great fun, but it takes a lot of challenge in terms of communication to really understand each other. So I always admit when I don't understand things, and by doing that and getting them to explain to me, they then admit when they don't understand things, and we have a really good communication that way. I also, through them, if I'm allowed to go on, get to talk to patient user groups, and then I have to talk to those in a different way again. And often, because I work in ophthalmology, they don't have very good vision, and therefore I'm not allowed to use slides or anything like that. And therefore I have to look at other routes to communicate with them and really develop my skills to get my point across to people who really don't necessarily understand what I do unless I get it right.
Wow, okay.
Hi, I'm Simon Bittleston. I work for a company called Schlumberger, which is an oil field services company quite large. I'll give you my last 3 jobs. So I ran all of engineering and manufacturing for about 5 years for the company. We were spending around about $700 million at the time, so I had to communicate a lot of projects to senior managers, to other people, convince them to spend some money and to actually get the products out into the marketplace. I then ran mergers and acquisitions, buying companies. We did more than 50 acquisitions, and one of the very interesting communication problems you get there is you have to often present these sorts of potential acquisitions to board members who only meet up once a quarter, who have very little knowledge about the company you're about to buy, you're about to spend a lot of money, and in a very short period you have to convey a lot of precise technical information and convince them you've understood the risks and you're going to get good value from the company you're going to buy. And then the third, I've been running research for Schlumberger, and in that, it's much more freedom to actually develop new things, but again, to communicate that science. And I thought about communicating to the general public, and one of the areas which I think was rather interesting is having to defend or enforce patents in a court, which is something I've done, and to actually be communicating to a jury of people who are not familiar with science and technology how to actually understand patent law and technical things quickly and accurately, because you're under oath. Okay.
Great.
Thanks, yeah. I'm, excuse me, Atty Emmett from the University of Surrey, but I also work for the ERA Foundation, which is a small charitable organisation encouraging young people into engineering. So teachers and young people are a key audience for me in that respect. Also involved with the all-party parliamentary group, the Parliamentary and Scientific Committee, which is the oldest and best, according to Isabel, who I think was behind me, of those all-party parliamentary groups. Before that, I worked for the EPSRC, where I was Director of Communications for some time, including the point when the scientific community took a coffin down Downing Street, complaining that EPSRC had killed British science. That was interesting.
Okay, there's a bit of communication there.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Chandi Nath. I'm Acting Head of the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology. And we're a small office that works with both Houses of Parliament. We have a parliamentary board, of which Stephen Metcalfe is a member. Our job really is to keep members informed about a whole range of scientific issues that are relevant to parliamentary debate. We're most well known for these 4-page briefing papers. Hands up if you've seen them. You can, yeah. Oh, that's not a bad show of hands. And they really, so this is what we're most well known for, but basically what we're trying to do is keep members of Parliament informed, and that can be explaining complex scientific concepts, but mostly, increasingly, it's about explaining bodies of evidence. So we're not talking about representing views of individual scientists, so it's about establishing what the research evidence shows, where does consensus lie, what do you not know as much as what you know. So that's the real challenge these days. I joined Parliament about 15 years ago. I used to work for the British Antarctic Survey, studying how cracks formed in ice sheets. I can confirm this is much more interesting. And
yeah.
Pre-social media, so I joined Parliament before social media took off, and I've really seen how much of an opportunity there is to increase the diversity of people that engage now. It used to be, it was really hard to engage, and now there are so many routes to engage with Parliament, with government policy more widely, and we're aware that the diversity of people engaging with Parliament is not as broad as it could be, and we are actively looking at some of those barriers to engagement. So I hope that we get the chance to explore some of that.
How cracks form in social media.
Yeah, exactly. Oh.
Hello?
I'm Paul Sagu from AWE. AWE's role is to support national defence and security, and we have a number of fantastic scientists and engineers at our organisation. So I'm here today with an open mind to try and understand how we can best promote their work across the various universities with which we work as well, and also about sort of, just going back to Mark's point, you know, there's a massive sort of emphasis on diversity and inclusion, and how we can sort of support, you know, people from sort of different backgrounds to enter into STEM, because it's such an important career. And in order to inspire the next generation, you know, we have to place a lot of emphasis on that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Nicola Blackwood. We may have spotted I'm not. I'm Stephen Metcalfe. I'm a Member of Parliament, and I had a call from Nicola, who was supposed to be here late yesterday, saying could I step in for her, so here I am. I'm former Chairman of the Science and Technology Committee at the House of Commons, and I'm still serving on the committee. As Atty said, I'm Chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Science, the Parliamentary and Scientific Committee, which tries to engage parliamentary colleagues with science at an accessible level, and that is, you know, very much as Post does. What we're trying to do is make science understandable for people with both a very short period of time in which to absorb quite a lot of information, as well as 101 other things that are trying to drag their attention away. So that's a very important role, I think, and we do that quite well with support of a secretariat. And more recently, I've become the government's envoy for the Year of Engineering, which is a very important year-long campaign launched a couple of weeks ago, which aims to change the perception of engineering. We know that we have a gap of around 20,000 engineers every year. It is in the interests of the nation and its economy that we fill that gap, and this is a campaign to engage 7 to 16-year-olds directly with engineers to try and inspire, as I said, that next generation of engineers and make sure that we have that pipeline full. Okay. So that's me, and looking forward, I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing here. But
okay, well, I mean, I do kind of slightly regret asking everybody to introduce themselves, because now we've got so many subjects on the table. And, you know, it's where do we go with this? Because it's everyone's come up with, you know, with just the most fascinating kind of, you know.
The good thing would be to see if this has sparked off any urgent, you know, comments from everyone else. It's good to get as many people into the conversation as possible. We've got another couple of people to go round, and we've already met Tom, but maybe just what you want to say.
Yeah, I'll try and do this quickly. So I'm currently Deputy CEO of EPSRC. That gives me a really intriguing communication thing. So on a normal day, I'll spend some time talking to government. I'll spend some time talking to government departments, which are not the same as government, it turns out. I'll spend some time talking to the academies, which aren't the same as academics, it turns out. And I'm also an academic. I'm also a computer scientist with an interest in human-centered development of digital technologies, particularly things that are embedded around us. So I spend an awful lot of time talking with social scientists to understand what people actually want technology to do, which again isn't the same as what technologists want. I'm also a father of 2 daughters who tell me what the world is like and the role of technology in it, and that's also rather interesting. And finally, for those of you who know me, I'm a very long-suffering Celtic fan, and that's actually the only point of communication that I actually have left with my father.
Right, okay. Mate, I don't know whether we want to go there or not, but... and finally?
So I'm Richard Jones. I'm a physicist from the University of Sheffield and an EPSRC council member. And public engagement's been important in my work for kind of more than a decade, really. But most recently, I've been thinking a lot about industrial policy. Been doing a piece of work with some economists, political scientists, policy wonks to kind of talk about industrial policy. That's brought me into contact with government and with Parliament. I got a ruling from your committee the other day. And really it's about convincing policymakers that technology is crucially important for productivity, for growth, for society's well-being, but also that technology doesn't happen by accident. It happens, people have to do it, and you have to give people the right environment and the right resources to do that.
Okay, thanks, that's great. I mean, so communicating complex ideas, getting important people to make decisions, the right decisions quickly, the general public, who are they? Patience. There's so many different questions here. I mean, you were saying, Mark, that maybe we should throw this out and see what the most pressing issue is.
Yeah, what do people think that of all that you've heard so far? What you think is the most important thing if you were to kind of kick off this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I also didn't mention that, you know, this idea that we need this new generation as well to be interested in science and engineering as well. And are they really, they're using technology, but are they interested in how it works or shaping its development? That's another question I think that was implied by a few people. Yeah.
So I think it's incredibly important to get the next generation in, and certainly in Liverpool, or in my group, I try and get all my PhD students and postdocs to be STEM ambassadors, and we go out to schools and we talk to schools, both from the primary level and in the secondary level, to try and get the children inspired by science and technology. And you need to get them at that level. You really need to get them at the 8, 9, 10-year-old level.
Why do you need to get them so early?
Because they need to be, that's when they're really able to inspire them. And that's when they need to start getting into the right sciences and maths, and not, you know, making the right choices at the next level. And if we wait till A level, it's too late. We've lost some of them already, and we just need to get the... I would say...
Why is it too late? What happens in that process?
Surely, I mean, the whole A-level system is the problem, isn't it? I mean, having to choose maths, chemistry, or biology, that is already the problem. You shouldn't have to. What other advanced nations ask you to choose that early? It's absolutely ludicrous.
So you think you're narrowing it down in a way, though, into
completely. And then also, to be a great engineer, you don't have to be a great mathematician. You actually have to understand humans.
Okay, Tom, I'm just going to go to answer you.
Yeah, okay, so I do a fair bit of this work with the ERA Foundation, and one of the things that teachers tell us a lot of the time is that they are so driven by the curriculum. now that unless you're going to engage with them on something that is curriculum related, it is difficult to get that material into the schools, and really the contact time with the kids doesn't really happen. So a core element of engaging at the moment with the teachers is to make it curriculum relevant, and I think that's, you know, we can rail against that all we like, but that's the system, and we've got to work with that system. That's the reality.
Is it possible to make?
Yeah, absolutely. So
what you're doing relevant?
So I mean, we started by producing some videos, and those videos were not necessarily done with the curriculum in mind. So there was some retrofitting as far as we were concerned. But we work with organisations now like the STEM Learning Centre, and they employ teachers or people who were recently teachers, and they've done a marvellous job making things curriculum relevant. So now what we do is we package those videos with a series of material around it, which makes it's so much easier for a teacher to be able to take that into the classroom and effectively use it without feeling that they are somehow stealing time from their curriculum.
So they've got a kind of pathway to show the relevance. I'll come to you in a minute, Chandy.
So, can I enhance all the kind of crowded curriculum stuff and the need to do that? I want to actually give a comment that's not mine, but it's Kate, my 8-year-old daughter, when she says, actually I want a chemistry set, not something that makes nice perfume.
Right.
And I think that's one of the core issues.
Can't you make nice perfume with a chemistry set?
Well, she wanted a chemistry set that would blow things up, because
Right,
she wanted to do chemistry. But all that the community would sell her was things to make soap, things to make perfume, things to make lipstick.
So there's a kind of, I guess, expectation.
At age 6, it's already been codified.
So there's a kind of expectation of what that young girl's going to be interested in. Chandy? Oh, got a point here. Okay, I've turned it down there, so don't worry about that. I'll turn you back up. But let's just get Chandy. I'm just going to, because this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get everyone involved in this. So I'll turn you up. Go on.
Hi there, David Rush, University of Edinburgh. So coming back to your comment about kind of these videos that you've packaged up, I think there's a kind of innate sense there that you've assumed that the teachers have that engineering confidence to be able to deliver that in the classroom. So how would you overcome that in the role as the ERA Trust?
So that's what the packaging was meant to do. So effectively, it makes it very clear how it links to the curriculum. So it makes a statement, this links in this way. It also provides then a series of activities that they can do with the classroom. So it gives them something to do as well as just something to say. Okay.
Well, I think the issue there is, so just thinking, you've got a list of things that you can do, but it's not giving them the kind of the deeper learning of an engineer.
What do you mean deeper learning?
So there's kind of that innate judgment and ability to assess, like for me, I'm a structural engineer, I know that these columns are supporting beams and things like that, but for a teacher, they may not have that innate ability. So how do you then train the teacher to think like an engineer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do hit on a point there, and I think there is an issue with people giving the confidence to be able to do those sorts of things. I don't think our videos will ever do that, and I don't think they're designed to do that. They're more supplementing when people are there. However, I think the National STEM Learning Centre do run training courses that enable that to happen. So I think there are vehicles there. They're just not my vehicle, if you see what I mean.
So it's maybe about, you know, using that relevance to build confidence and actually maybe bringing the teachers in and, you know, and working with them and actually, you know, Anyway, Chandy. Stephen,
Yeah, so briefly, I'm really interested in hearing from the connectors that have just all been given those wonderful awards. So my personal experience I had my share of exciting videos at school, was drawn into science, but I don't feel...
Did the videos do it for you?
They did it for me, but then they didn't help me once I got there. So I just didn't feel like I was equipped with the skills to make a go of a scientific career, because a lot of those skills are soft skills, you know, being able to navigate the internal politics, having a thick skin, dealing with criticism. I wasn't told I needed any of those things to survive in science. And maybe that was a while ago now, not giving away my age, but I'm really interested in the experience of the people that we've seen.
It's not just about knowing about engineering or science, but actually how to navigate this strange world of science and how to feel like you actually belong there as well, I think.
Yeah, how to survive in it and what else you need other than just understanding the hard science.
Yeah, it's not just about knowing the science. I'll come to you in a second, but I think Stephen wanted to make a point.
Thank you. Just 3 quick points. The reason you need to get to people at a younger age is that their image of where they fit into the world is established at a very young age. It's not about teaching them to be an engineer. It's about saying there's nothing to stop you being an engineer or a scientist or a
possibility.
And you see that much more in those who have some knowledge of these areas.
Yeah.
They don't limit their aspirations at such an early age. That's the first point. The second point is around this is a shared problem about getting more people into STEM, and it doesn't happen. Yes, we can blame the curriculum, we can blame the government, we need to do more to get people involved, but actually this is a collective problem. We need to be putting ourselves out there as much and helping the teachers to deliver it. So it's actually doing it with them and for them, as well as just giving them the tools. And the third point about communication is that the other group that I chair in Parliament is the Artificial Intelligence all-party group. The world is changing more rapidly than probably at any period in time, and we have to find a way of engaging with people who have yet to engage with these changes. Otherwise, this what's called the fourth industrial revolution will create a divide between those who have engaged and understand the concepts of a new world and those who rail against it.
Okay, that's quite a lot, and you know, it's kind of up to you where we want to go with this conversation. You know, there's a point. I know that you're there with the microphone, and we're going to come to you in a second. But there's this point of why are young people, children, feeling like they what's making them lose this aspiration, this sense they could be anyone, they could do anything. I think that's a really, a few people have hit on that, and the question about, are people going to get left behind? Hello.
Yeah, there's specific points.
Let me just go on.
Completely disagree with the last two comments about having to get people young. And completely agree with Mark's comment that people are choosing far too early. So I can speak from experience on 2 counts. I can tell you the school system is really failing boys at the moment. So you will see this diversity coming through into engineering, but you will also see the boys leaving it. The school system is not great. I can speak from my son's experience, who was terrible in school, and has since come away, gone through the further education, is now a second-year engineering degree student with straight distinctions all the way through. For me, I was a self-employed forestry contractor until I was 39. I now have 3 degrees and a PhD.
Right.
So we probably left it a little bit late coming back, to be fair, but to expect people to choose at this early age, it's crazy. We're all living so much longer.
Yeah. What do you think is, for example, in your son's case, what do you think is like putting
Boys
him
do
off?
not like to sit down, be quiet, and get on with work when they're teenagers.
So is it the type
rarely.
of
So I have a son and a daughter, both gone through the same school, same teachers, and the difference in achievement between the two of them is huge. Except that when my son got to 21, he's so grown up, he's pushing so hard, he's working so well in university now.
Yeah.
Stunning. Whereas the teachers would have told you when he was 16, 17 that he was a dropout.
Because he didn't like sitting down and
studying.
He
wanted to go out and build things and make things.
Yeah.
So, and I agree as well, he really struggled with mathematics, but he has some fantastic mathematics lecturing now. So yeah, definitely you need to concentrate on young people, but you don't write them off when they're 20 years old.
Right, okay. That's a really interesting point. Okay.
I just wanted to talk about inspiring young people and a new system that's just got going over the last couple of years in Cambridge, which is where companies go into schools, secondary schools, and they talk to them a bit about science and technology, but what they do then is they take a group of, say, 60 kids from a couple of schools, and they do a fun day doing fun science and technology at the company, and there are about 25 companies doing this now in the Cambridge area. Welding Institute doing welding chocolate and all these sorts of fantastic fun things. And the idea is when they come, they shouldn't be doing any detailed maths or anything. They should just be enjoying doing a bit of science and engineering. And so anybody can turn up. It's equal numbers of boys and girls from any school that comes, and it seems to inspire. And I think it's a very neat idea, and companies are very willing to do this.
What is it that's actually giving you? Is it the fun? Is it the being outside of school, or is it?
Well, I think it's the system was set up by Robert Marshall, by the way. He runs a big company in Cambridge. And I think what it is, he insisted that the young scientists and engineers in the companies were the people who would run it. So there are people who are very close in age, or as close as possible in age to the young people, and would understand their mindset a little bit better. Yeah. And I think that's worked because they actually do things which will be more natural and interesting to that young community.
Okay. I'll come to you in a second, Rachel. I wanted to go back to Mark, but also there's a point over here that we wanted to hear. Oh, yeah, someone who's that? Okay, we'll come to you in a second. Okay, yep.
Yep. Hi, Noha Bulmegd from University of Bristol. So I'm a PhD student, and we do quite a lot of outreach activities where we go into schools and we do outreach demos, and we get kids interested in science and stuff. But I also teach year 7 and year 9 science in after school programs. And one of the issues that a lot of these students face is that they can't relate the national curriculum to their day-to-day lives, and they can't relate their interest from what they're learning, and it's very much a learn and then reproduce on a piece of paper approach to learning. Additionally, the having to choose between your A-levels and choosing STEM subject is a large commitment, and it means that students have to narrow their interest.
Right.
So for example, when I was choosing my subjects, I had to choose 3 STEM subjects, but I was also very interested in philosophy and humanities that I wanted to do but didn't have the opportunity to.
Right.
So I think this kind of narrowing approach of having to decide what your destined career path or interests are at that young an age puts students off, because STEM subjects are traditionally seen as very difficult.
Yeah, it's not necessarily following their passion and their immediate kind of excitement about what they're into on the day, so to speak, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly, and they see themselves as having to commit to something that they might not feel completely comfortable in their ability to at that point. And the second point that I just want to make is about representation in schools. So students, particularly from BME, low socioeconomic backgrounds, will go into universities, whatever, and they will see upper middle class white students, and the majority of the science and technology industry is dominated by these types of, so there's a lack of representation. So students at a very young age are unable to see themselves in these positions and therefore apply for particular subjects according to that.
I mean, do you think the problem is a problem of inspiration, that the kids are not inspired, or is it just this weird system that doesn't kind of harness that inspiration?
I think the system is the reason why they're not inspired. They're so dogged down by what they need to learn in the curriculum and produce in a test in order to get certain scores. And they are so, the teachers themselves are time limited in what they can provide and have to submit to a certain standard of national curriculum, that they don't have the time or indeed the resources to go in and produce the kind of inspirational science or things that can relate to their real life.
Okay. Rick, if you can just go all the way round. In the meantime, maybe we'll just quickly come back to Mark. I don't know what you think of all the... I mean, I guess we're talking about inspiration. How important is inspiration, not just for the very young or the young, but everybody to get involved in science?
I do think that the science community has done a much better job recently in the last 5 years of being inspiring. And I think this you know, you're hearing it from all around. There's all these different examples of it. So to me, that isn't, you know, I feel that's great, and I think there's more of that to come, and we just need to encourage it, because it comes out in young PhD students. You don't have to, as long as you don't stop them doing it, they'll do it. That's my experience. But I think that the systemic problems are we really need to challenge this thing about the narrowing down of people's horizons at the age of 12 or 13 while they choose, you know, to whether they're in the I'm a science geek or I'm not a science geek, you know, and that is not just about government policy. That is about a British culture, in my view, where we like to give people teams to be a member of. You're a geek team. You're not. You're a cool arty person, and that forevermore are they that person. And so that there is a subtlety there, which I think we have to. I think the science community has to get around by being a bit more open and diverse in its approach to who they let in.
Stephen, I'm going to come to you. I know you, but we've got this man over here that wanted to come in for a while, so we'll come straight to you afterwards.
Thank you. Harald Haas, University of Edinburgh, and as you may sense, I'm not a British national, I'm a Brexiteer from Germany. So what I wanted to say, I've been living here for quite some time, and I've observed the environment, and I want to make 2 points. One is, I come from a culture where there is no division between science and engineering. And science and engineering has the same status as science has, and that has a different perspective in society. That's the first point I want to make. And the second point is, I think it's important. Schools are important in developing the profession, but I think what is equally important is to develop the industry around it. To develop, I'll give you an example. In the US, there's so many Stanford graduates because there's Google, and there's Amazon. These are the big corporates that absorb these young sort of individuals. And I think at schools, you're inspired not by your teacher, but what you could do in your profession. So how fancy the robot is. equally have for children, and they are looking into all these gadgets, and that inspires sort of a profession. And I think this country has a history of very good sort of industrial development in the finance sector, has perhaps a bit neglected the industry sector, but the industry is a sector that drives us into the fourth industrial revolution, which is all about data-centric societies, and there the engineers need to be seen as the lighthouses that are the enabler to transform us into that fourth.
Are engineers seen as lighthouses?
No, because if you look into BBC News, you see lots of news about science, but how often do you see something, a breakthrough in engineering? So engineering is like, I am an electrical engineer and I wireless communications engineer. It's the stigma of someone who lays cable in a house. But it's much more than that.
Okay, all right.
Just on that point, of course, that's one of the aims of changing the perceptions of engineers, so that when you hear that there's been an advance in your mobile phone, you understand that is an engineer who did that. But just want to go back to, and I agree with what you said, back to Mark's point. When I was choosing my A-levels back in the very early 80s, I wanted to do art, technical drawing and maths, because I wanted to be a computer artist, animator, combine the two. But of course my curriculum wouldn't let me, and they said there's no future in that. So you've ended up with me here today. But you're absolutely right. The problem is we have to work with what we've got. And the idea that we're going to change the curriculum branch and route again to combine these, come up with a whole set of new exams, when on the back of another set of exams, my colleague, the teaching colleague behind us, would cringe again at more changes. It's bad enough as it is. So it's what I'm always exploring and trying to find is how we work with what we've got to achieve those aims, rather than just come up with entirely new systems.
Have you got any ideas about what that might be?
Well, that's why I want to see our school. So one of my suggestions that I've made public before is that Ofsted should examine, or when doing an inspection of a school, should look at external engagement as an indicator of how well that school is engaging with its local community. So where there is an opportunity to bring businesses in from outside, external opportunities, that is something that they are measured on. That doesn't change the curriculum, but it allows to demonstrate they're enriching their students' experience.
Could be a criterion. Yeah. Okay.
Just to pick up a couple of points, the point about industry, which I think is an important one, and the point about people like them, people having that sense that there are people like them around. I just want to make a point about geography. I come from a city where a mile west of my university, about 90% of the young people go to university. They're surrounded by people who are in jobs that look exciting and things they want to do. But through less than a mile east, actually, the participation rates fall down to 10% or so. This is in Sheffield. Yeah. So, but it's the same story. The same story in Liverpool. It's certainly the same story in Nottingham. Yeah. The place like Mansfield, whole areas like Lincolnshire, where there is no science-based industry, there is no research. So people. Why would people think this is for them at all? They've never come across a scientist or an engineer or a technologist, because that industry base is there. So I think this is connected to the economic inequalities of the country and to the inequalities in where science spending takes place, and this all adds up to a situation where over large parts of the country people don't think that this is something for them.
I mean, going back to this idea that Stephen's brought in, that you've got to work with what you've got, and that is the reality of our country. What is the answer to that? How do we open it up? How do we get people? And there was a point, about lots of people from minority groups feel that science is not for them. People from different classes feel that this is not for them. How do we actually, if there's no industry, if there's no route for them, how do we actually then engage them and say to them, this is for you as well?
Well, I don't think we should be so passive about it. I don't think we should accept that this is the way things are. Lots of things about our country need to be fixed. I don't think we should take it lying down, basically.
Okay, all right.
So one thing I think we need to add too here is that we're saying engineering, but engineering is a mass of different things. And just looking around the table here, we all do different sorts of engineering. And when you go into schools and tell kids, in my instance, that the engineering that's involved in medicine, they haven't a clue. And they don't see that as engineering. So we need to, as advocates of this, get this message out that engineering is a whole load of different things. So when you say they don't see engineers, they don't understand what engineering is. They don't realise their teachers or maybe their environment thinks an engineering engineering is a very set thing. It's not. We're all engineers and we're completely different things. We do completely different things. We need to get that message across, and then they can see where they fit into that engineering field and that engineering opportunity.
Okay.
We're missing a point.
I mean, we actually, and it goes back to another point, that we don't really know what the engineering of the future will be at all.
No.
Yeah.
So somebody who does computing and digital stuff, the thing how often, success for me is being invisible. So if you actually notice when this isn't working, it's failing. And that's actually a key success criteria for most of engineering. You just want it to be in the background. So your comms problem's kind of interesting, isn't it? So how do you inspire people to do things that nobody notices? So part of what you have to do is actually explain, if it's not there, what it's like, and the critical importance that's kind of hidden within it. And I think that's a big part of the success of the UK is based upon the fact that we have unquestionably the strongest science and research base in the world.
Yeah.
But who would notice?
Because it's all working very well.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting idea. When it comes to engineering, I'll come to you in a second, Natty. There's a few hands before, but I just want to sum up this idea. When engineering, when it's working well, you don't notice it, perhaps. And how do you communicate that? Paul?
And just to go back to Rachel's first point about outreach, I think we, quite fortunate at EWE, we invest a lot of time and effort in outreach work. From the university engagement level, we have a number of strategic alliances. A lot of the universities here are represented. And we have looser relationships with a number of others. But that's also supported by, which I think is a complementary facet, with the number of engagements we have with local schools. And I think one example where we had a lot of success was we had the privilege of showcasing the Orion laser facility, the UK's largest laser, to support our programme at the Royal Society Summer Science Exhibition last year. And it was just so inspiring to see the kids' faces, how much they enjoyed physics, and actually the multidisciplinary sort of expression of the work that we do, because science, doesn't work in isolation of engineering. STEM, all works together. So I think for me, really, it's about industry doing outreach, across the UK. I think organisations that can afford to invest in outreach, that's great, but I think they should help to support organisations that perhaps don't have that investment available to them, because I think if we do it together, collaboratively, across the UK, we can try and address this problem.
I mean, we kind of kicked off this whole discussion by saying that the culture was changing and we are reaching out much more, and there is this kind of drive towards communication, which is why everyone's here today. Are we just yet to see the fruits of this, in that culture is actually going to lead to a better discussion, a better understanding? Or am I just being like super rosy spectacled there? I'm going to come to
But I think just to answer that question, so it's essentially there's several problems. One of which was that I don't think we were pulling our weight, to say, as Richard says, before, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was just like the people who were doing engineering and science were just doing it, they were happy, but they just weren't really getting out there, getting into the media, getting into schools. But now we are, and it's growing, and you can't just take that for granted, that's got to keep going. But there's then these other problems which you also have to solve. So you could get loads more people getting excited, and then the schools might let them down. Or you get loads more people get excited, and there are not enough science teachers. Loads more, so there's several ways in which that surge will then not produce any fruit.
Yeah, there's so many steps to it.
That's where policy comes in. I think so. On the one hand, you've got the inspiration, but then we, as a community, we have to try and persuade Parliament to change policy, because, in my view, there are systemic problems in the education system.
And that is kind of, you're
I think I've been slightly misinterpreted. I'm not saying that nothing should change, Richard. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that at this point in time, the idea that we come up here in isolation with this wonderful new curriculum and the government will take it up and next year it'll have solved the problem is pie in the sky. So, well, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a vision, but let's not pretend it's going to be suddenly adopted and that will resolve everything. We've all got to work together. And just on the point Richard was making about 90% of the people in one area go to university and 10% don't. That's why you need, and this is back to this residual self-image, that if you don't see yourself doing anything in the world, which is what educated, rich, open-minded people tend to do. They don't limit themselves at any point. They say, I can do that. Whereas you're from a housing estate in Basildon, where I represent, where it's, you know, it's a grind and it's difficult, you're told often that this isn't for you. And that's why I want to get to people young. It's not so much tell them to be an engineer at the age of 7. Tell them they can be anything at the age of 7, and introduce them to engineers, doctors, nurses, scientists, as well as footballers, actors, other writers, poets. But it's about, I can be anything I want to be, and we've just got to enable that, and then we can make sure that enough of them are doing the STEM stuff.
Okay, I've got to go to Chandy. There's those points. I'll come to you in a second, but there's a few people that I kind of facially promised that I was going to give the microphone to, and then I'll come to you. And the first of those is Chandy, then Ati, but keep it brief because there's lots of people who want to grab the mic now. Okay.
Briefly, I just wanted to say we've got to talk about scientific method as well. We've talked about science, getting people to do science. Even people that don't become scientists, it's really important that people appreciate what science is, why research, why rigorous, systematic research has a value that needs to be taken into account across all policy decisions. And one of the reasons that we talk about post-fact, post-truth, is it's just because of this, the decline and appreciation of the value of the scientific method, and that whether people become astronauts or not, that's something everyone needs to value.
So you think that's going down? People appreciate science less and less?
No, I can't really say it's going down, but there's an ongoing scepticism, and there's a perception that there was some sea change due to the events of last year. I don't believe in that.
Isn't scepticism part of the scientific method?
It is, but I do think that one of the studies that we recently did showed that within Parliament, people didn't quite understand what set scientific research results apart from other forms of evidence. So it is about understanding what's distinct about different forms of knowledge and how to weigh it up against each other. And that's a skill everybody needs, I think.
Okay. Ati?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of quick points then. First of all, I would agree entirely with Rachel. I mean, the key thing about explaining the diversity of, well, science and engineering, but engineering I'm particularly interested in this respect. And one of the sound bites I tend to use, and particularly relevant given your discipline, is that engineers save more lives than medics, right? And I really do believe that when you think about water and environment and engineering and things like that. But the real point I want to make is we've got a lot of, I think, agreement and consensus around this table. And then you think to yourself, well, why are these issues? Why do they still exist? And I think one of the problems we've got is that we've got a lot of a fragmented community out there. There's lots of engineering professional institutions. We've got 2 major campaigns in engineering going at the moment, one from the government and one from the Royal Academy of Engineering. Why 2? So, you know, the worry I have is while there's consensus there, that we are not presenting ourselves in the strongest way to the audiences that we really want to engage with. So that's an issue.
Okay, I'm going to go straight to you, then you, and then you, and then we'll go on.
So this is to change tack.
Yeah, let me just turn you up a bit.
So we've talked a lot about kind of engagement with schools, and we've touched very briefly on kind of other forms of media engagement.
Yeah.
So the questions are, one, what are the better forms for media engagement? You know, are we changing kind of social media platforms? Do we need to engage more there, or do we, for the credibility's sake, go for more rigorous, you know, not journal publications, but newspapers? And the other question is, when we think about engineering, it's not being perceived or presented in mainstream media, such as television programs and theatres and films, as something sexy, you know, because it's one of these kind of hidden things. So how do we then change that perception in, say, you know, do we have a casualty for engineers type thing? So that's my question to the panel and to the audience.
Okay. And that, Rick, if you can just run that round to this man's been waiting a while.
Thanks. Just a couple of points to pick up on the systematic, rigorous science. I wanted to underline that. I think in schools, I think we need far more specialist teachers. We don't want to constrain pupils from studying just a few subjects, but we need specialist chemists because we can't allow people to see explosions if we don't have specialist chemists, specialist physicists, and so on. There are far too few specialist science teachers in schools. And just to say one other thing, there are, as somebody else mentioned, there is real inspirational science going on in schools these days. We see it at the Royal Society exhibitions, of which I'm chair of the Summer Science Exhibition Committee, as it happens. But there is fantastic inspirational science, but only in a few schools, not enough of those schools. Second, just to move the discussion a little bit in a different direction. I applaud the EPSRC for what they've been trying to do to improve the impact of scientific research in universities. They're giving us impact money these days, but I want to tell government that it's far too little. We can't have a major international impact in biomedicine, in my own area of drug discovery and drug development, with tens of thousands, which is all that EPSRC can give us. We need millions. We're losing and giving away a lot of discoveries and inventions in universities. We have heard an industrialist already going to court and defending patents. I wish we could do it more often in universities. We're having to give up our patents because the first year might be 1,000 or 2,000, the second year is 20,000, 30,000.
Right.
And our development officers in university don't want to know, especially in drug development, which takes many years. So the message to government is, please, we've said this many times before, but we just have to keep saying it. It's chickens to ask you for $1 billion or $2 billion, right? I can tell you where $1 billion or $2 billion is. I can tell you where $1 billion or $2 billion is going in other sectors of life.
Right.
Bring it into universities. Use the innovations that are going on in universities for the good of the country, and then you'll see real innovation progress in the country.
So you want billions spent on this. Rick, if you can just pass it on to over here. In the meantime, Tom, you can come back on that. I mean, there are a few different kind of threads here, and maybe we can just sum them up in a second. But
well, so it's rather nice to be beaten up for not. For the normal comment is not supporting enough curiosity-driven research, actually, is not the normal comment. So a couple of things. I mean, I absolutely agree about science and engineering as the innovation of the creation of wealth in this country. And surprisingly for a Scot, I find myself agreeing with the government. So the government... one of the things that has happened recently in the government with the publication of the industrial strategy was a couple of things just to kind of highlight the reality was here. Of the 10 pillars in that strategy, research and innovation is one of the 10. It's not in alphabetical order, and it's number 1. Of the 12 of the pillars in the negotiation for Brexit, you see research and innovation as a key feature there. Of the money released for the industrial strategy, 4.7 billion is the spend on UKRI to link the research base to innovation, to explicitly do that. So the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund has started to release that money as a deliberate link between the core science and the industrial base and its pull through to industry.
So you're saying the billions are coming? They're on the way?
The billions are shipping. They are already there.
Right, okay.
But billions are never enough, because then my particle physicists and my chemists and my mathematicians will quite rightly also say, what about the next industrial strategy in 20 years' time?
Okay. There was a point over here.
Actually, I've totally lost track now. The debate is moving about so fast.
Well, I mean, that's fine, because I was about to try, and it's kind of up to you where you want to take this. So, you know, if I could just quickly sum up some of the threads here. You know, there's a question about communicating science and the scientific method, and this question of rigor and how scientists work. Is that running at odds to the idea of inspiring people and making it fun and exciting? There's a question about, are we putting the money in? Are we linking up as well? This question, is it all of these initiatives that people are taking, and certainly we've had this cultural shift of wanting to communicate what we do much more, but is it linking together? And yeah, I mean, it's kind of up to you where you want to take this discussion. That's the whole point of this format.
I think scientific literacy is something that we've been talking, I think, mostly about how to get what is clearly a chronic problem, getting more diverse and just in quantity more people into science and engineering, because we all believe that if we don't do that, this country will get less wealthy and will, you know, I think
it's a money thing.
Wealth is not money, actually. I think wealth is health.
Okay,
wealth is being able to help people in other countries when they need, you know, it's mobilizing power. Anyway, I don't mean money. I mean just
you mean more of a good
all
feeling.
Of us, you know, living healthy lives, independent lives, all these things, having our food. This is wealth, in my view. And I think that's in jeopardy, I really do. But the other thing is, a democracy can't really survive, and we won't make the right decisions if actually the majority of people who are not going to be working in science and engineering, because it's not going to be a majority obligation, are not participating. And I think these are two different things in my view, and we've hit on it, and I think it would be great to have a bit more of a conversation about how to do that. And throw my 2 pennies worth in here.
Please do.
It comes back to this narrow education thing.
Yeah.
Because not only do you forcing some people into science at an early age, and they have to specialize, and that's a big decision, but you're also depriving other people, the majority of any science education, from the age roughly of 15 until they graduate if they go into university. And that is, again, ludicrous in my view. Like, the universities have a lot to answer for on this. When we expanded from 10% of the population being educated in university to 50%, we should have immediately changed the system and said, we are not going to have specialist degrees. The normal degree will be a general degree. You'll have to do arts and you'll have to do sciences. And that would have set the tone for the whole country. Okay. And we didn't do it. And we missed the trick, and we should do it now.
Yeah. So we're trying to generate wealth in its broadest sense, and wealth of knowledge, but is that wealth of knowledge being shared amongst the general public? We're back to them again.
So I just want to add to that, really. So I think if people don't, and it comes back to what Tanya was saying, is that if people don't have any education in the science, how can we expect them to understand what we're doing and the importance of what we're doing? And this message of getting this other 90% or whatever who aren't engineers to understand that engineering is so important to the wealth and health of the whole country is not going to work, because they don't understand how to assess what we're doing. We can't make that point. So we have to try and... Sorry, Tom's going to say no. So we need to... I suppose I see our role, because we're now in this position, is we have to go out and explain to them in ways in which they can understand the importance of what we do. And that's right across the whole area. And I don't know how you do that. So I'm coming back to it.
I guess we're here to find out in a way,
but I think we have a beholden to do that.
Don't you think it's ludicrous you can take an English degree? You can take an English degree and have no science element. And you call that an education. I mean, it is ludicrous.
What about an engineering degree with no English education?
Equally ludicrous.
Okay, well, there's some points I know in the further away, but let's just get some points around the table, because I think people want to...
Can I just say, I think it's really important to say, the public is not the problem. The public is not the problem in all this. I think... you know, it's very easy for us to get into this state where we think, oh, if only the public knew more about science, everything would be fine. The public actually trusts scientists amazingly. You know, look at public surveys. Trust levels for scientists are about the highest of any professional body in the country. We have not got a problem with publics distrusting science. That's not the problem at all. We have a problem, actually, with some of our kind of elites not understanding science and engineering. That is a problem. But the public is not the problem here.
Okay, the public get it, but maybe the elites don't get it.
I do want to pick up on a couple of things. I mean, the one thing that I think, and I think it's because I do embedded algorithms that are based upon the sensing of people going through a room, is that if we shift, as the rhetoric around Industry 4.0 suggests and others, if we shift to a society where it's at a very basic level, mediated through technology, okay?
Yeah.
The actual ability to understand society and to interact and affect and undertake agency in society becomes predicated in understanding the actual features of the technology that's constructed it. Okay, so you see this in social media. You see this in the ways in which things happen in social media because of the algorithms that are selecting things to present to people, but people don't dismiss that because they don't understand those algorithms. You will see this in the issues in and around the safety and concerns of autonomous systems and driverless systems and control systems around us. You will see this in the ways in which elections will be increasingly mediated through different social media technologies, and then predicate that on top of the ways in which the technology and the ways in which we construct it around us means that how we individually understand society and the society we constructed will require and need to understand what has been constructed by whom and what's a feature of the science and technology in it.
I mean, isn't there kind of two ways? I mean, you guys are all engineers. I'm not. I'm just a consumer. I understand it in a different way. I just press the button, it does its thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you really need to know how the black box works?
Well, you do at the moment when your insurance premium doubles because your shopping practices over the last 10 years indicate your level of alcohol consumption is out with a certain norm.
Have you been looking at my social media?
Or to give you another example of this, my very good colleague, our head of school, bought insurance for his daughter, and put a black box in the back of the car. His daughter has fallen out with him because my colleague is also an ex-rally driver, and in one day he borrowed her car and drove it as he normally drives.
Okay. So it's like, don't mess with my algorithm.
To that one point. And it's about this algorithms and the fact that the world is changing, we don't necessarily realise it. So I had a constituent come and see me who couldn't get an online identity verified. He'd done the same thing for 11 years, but slight change, it was now being dealt with a credit agency. It was an algorithm that decided he hadn't got a passport, it can't be him. And so his life was changed, and he didn't understand how or why. And I think it's a question of just understanding that certain actions are going to have different effects in the future than they have in the past.
And I want to add one simple fact, and this is a kind of fact to think about. For those of us in this room, none of us are mandated to have a digital identity. If you have a benefit in the UK, you're mandated to have a digital identity because it's the only way to get a benefit.
Okay. Yep. I can just reach over with this one.
Brian Falzon from Belfast. That's okay. I'm fine. Just wanted to pick up on Richard's optimism about trust in scientists, and I do believe that this conversation was meant to be about communication. See, I don't share that optimism. And I don't share that optimism in what's happening globally in terms of populism, in terms of a mistrust in expertise and in the institutions that support them. So I guess my question is, what do we need to do to restore some of that trust, which I believe is being lost? And part of it perhaps has to do with the media, which gives equal time to bad ideas.
Okay. So you think the trust is going down, not up? And yeah, I mean, there's this question about do people really call them the public, call them what you want? Do they really kind of get it? Do they understand the difference between scientifically rigorous information or evidence and not?
I think that's an interesting point. I think the trust is based on, because going back to your point, Richard, the public, really appreciate scientists and engineers, but I think the trust element is based on presenting evidence.
Isn't understanding evidence different from trust? Trust is kind of
understanding evidence that they can apply to their everyday lives. That's actually making a difference to them. I think that's important.
Trust is like you've got it covered. I don't need to know.
One other point. I think scientists and engineers have a responsibility to share, transfer, and manage knowledge. I don't think some industries do that very well, because that in itself is an inspirational message, as well as some of the outreach initiatives that we heard about. So, scientists and engineers have a responsibility to share that knowledge to the next generation, as well as doing those fun activities. I think that's important.
Right, okay. So there's a kind of, I guess, ethical kind of side to it as well.
I mean, I think it's, I don't know, it's a trust. I think trust is really important, but I don't think it is about understanding rationally the evidence. I think they're sort of two different things, because, for instance, I had an argument with my neighbour who's a Christian, and he always wants to talk about evolution. He says he just doesn't believe in it. And, I come up with evidence after evidence. It makes no difference. Roughly,
we're
not doing the thing. No, and then he says, "Well, have you seen those experiments?" I said, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Well, then why do you believe that? You're not a biologist. Why do you believe it works? You haven't seen any of this evolving viruses in the lab, which is the example I gave. Evolution is actually working today. And he's like, and I know because I've got friends who do that work, and I trust them. I don't look at their results. I don't even understand half what they do, but I trust them. And so part of it is that I know them and I trust them, right? And I think, so science and engineering just has to have a public presence that is in there, that people know people. It's about people, actually, trust. It's about seeing a person, hearing a person.
What you're saying, Mark, is that the kind of trust is kind of more important than going through all the data yourself and assessing the evidence.
Higgs boson, does it exist? I don't know.
Yeah.
I trust the people who are doing that work.
So you know,
I trust them, and I don't know even any of them, but I trust them because I believe that science mostly is very honest, and I know I've done it enough to have real experience of that. But if you've never met an engineer or scientist, if you live in a place where you've never met one, and you very rarely see them on TV, you're not going to trust science. Doesn't matter how much evidence you have, I think.
Yeah.
So we've just got to be out there more in that sense. I think the trust is really about being on the ground, going to schools. Really, it's that simple.
Okay. Interesting. So we actually, as scientists, kind of rely on trust quite a lot as well. It's not actually about...
Yeah, I don't think that trust and evidence, I don't think they're at odds with each other.
Yeah.
We need people, so everybody makes subjective judgments at some level. We need trusted figures, but they need to be providing representative evidence-based views. So it's about using the right conduits to get the evidence base out to a wider audience. So it's about who those trusted people are, who gets to be in that position of authority, and who's actually steering people's opinions.
Who do you trust?
Well, you obviously are an excellent facilitator of this conversation.
Well,
for example, as a child, I trusted my parents, and that was a mistake for many reasons, in terms of forming evidence-based judgments. But it's about that figures, certain figures hold power. So if we, as scientists, want the public, to boost the level of public understanding of science, it's about understanding who those figures are, working through them, whether they are religious leaders or not.
Okay.
I think people judge people by their motivations, and I think scientists still, you look at these. I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to these surveys. The surveys show at the top there you have doctors and scientists. You have industrial. It matters who you work for. So industrial people who work for business get trusted less. At the bottom you have journalists and politicians, and. I'm sorry, I joke about that. Actually, that's a serious problem. That is a problem about, and there is a problem about authority in general not being trusted. But the place, where the problems really are not actually in academic science. Of course, people believe many contradictory things, and people don't have to buy into the whole package. Not even scientists have to buy into the whole package. Lots of people, are very happy to use technologies when they suit them. They're less happy about others. Even, not everybody believe. Even not all scientists believe in the theory of evolution. Believe it or not, I occasionally get surprised by that. So, we're kind of all humans. We have this kind of giant contradictory bundle of things that we believe and we don't believe. But on the whole, science doesn't do too badly. I think the point about who you know is really important. And if I can just come back to our earlier discussion about places where there weren't any scientists, and not being passive about it. Very simple thing that all of us can do. We all like to go out to schools. We can just occasionally think, well, maybe I won't go to kind of leafy West Sheffield. I'll kind of just go a few more miles and go out to Rotherham, or maybe I'll go to Grimsby. Who do people
in Rotherham trust? Who do they actually trust?
They trust their neighbours. They trust their community figures. They trust. These aren't places that are. These are places that are working, good, functional communities. So they have people that they trust, and if you make the trip to go out there, they'll trust you too.
Okay. I'll just grab this one quickly. I'll come to you in a second, Tom.
Just to follow that up, I'd make one. Actually, there's a famous quote from somebody who once said, "The measure of a scientist's eminence is his ability to hold up progress in his field." One thing that people definitely do not understand is the scientific method and peer review. With all of its problems that come along with it, it's still the best method we have for testing evidence. And I think, as you said earlier on, we need to be teaching the public about that. They can judge for themselves then whether they want to accept the evidence. But if they think that one set of evidence is equal to another, they're sorely misled.
Do we ever try and do that? To talk about the actual process of peer review, of how scientific evidence emerges, or it's just about the evidence itself? I'm going to come to you in a second. I'm just going to go to Chandy first. And
just want to do a shameless plug of Post. So it's not all about formal education. One of the things that we try and do is to run training within Parliament to actually teach staff and members about scientific methods. So to explain what the genesis of different forms of evidence is and how they sit against each other. So it does happen. It's sometimes about understanding the group you want to work with and starting small. And I don't think that just one blanket kind of science communication will work for everybody. You have to think who you're actually trying to get your message across to.
I mean, do you think that's something that needs to be expanded? Do you agree with the point that, okay, we maybe want to communicate this, the Higgs boson or evolution, but do we ever explain how that knowledge is kind of established and the actual process? And, you know, I know you've at that one point, but do we need to grow that and speak more about that rather than individual cases?
So my world is pretty small, so the world of Parliament, I feel that, we need to grow that knowledge within Parliament, but we're aware of it, and we are, and I think other people might have views about other sectors.
Okay, I'm going to come to you in a second, Stephen. Okay, all right, give us a final thought then.
No.
Yeah.
Well, okay, the final thought that is around those really interesting but hard to understand concepts is to bring it down to relatable examples. So, for example, when the first laser was invented, no one had thought it had a use, and now they're absolutely everywhere. The Large Hadron Collider, that's an extraordinary amount of money to explain to people, and yet it has broken down barriers, not just finding the Higgs boson, but in other areas of medicine and in the ability to save and consume electricity around superconductivity, those sorts of things. So make it understandable to the people you're trying to sell the ideas to so that they can buy into it as well. And sometimes we're not very good at making it relatable.
Okay.
We make it too complicated because we need to try and impress each other, not who we're trying to get to.
Okay, so it's more about impressing you. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Stephen. It's kind of final thoughts time, actually, but I want to offer that out to each and every one of you to have a final thought. You don't have to have it, take this up, but there's a point with the man in the red at the back there, and if you can make
actually, as a final thought, I think I want to come back to the point made by Richard. As the gentleman that I come from a foreign country, so when I arrived to the UK, and one thing that it's really, for me, surprising is the fact that we leave in this country behind a significant part of the population because the way how the society is structured.
Yeah.
And when I came to this country...
Can I ask where you're from?
Oh, I'm come from Italy, but I lived in France, at the border with Germany, so I'm used to those system where you send your kids to the local school, because the local school here is the same everywhere. Teachers are placed in schools because they are good and the school needs good. If it's a school in a poor area, it needs a good teacher will be sent there. This has changed in the UK, it's not there. It's very, very structured now. And I've been caught in this country coming here with my wife being British. Suddenly she wanted to move because of schools, and I never could understand until I moved to a place where I paid twice more for my house, but it's a very good school, and suddenly my kids get a much better education. And then private education comes into play. So it's structured in such a way that actually you can bring good education, good things, and good science, and good thinking people in wealthy area, and we leave behind a significant amount of population in this area that Richard was underlying, where there are not access to people with a bit of education, a bit of ambition. And I can see that every day being football coaches. I see people coming from different areas with different education, and I can see the opportunity given to the children completely change. And I think it's an opportunity missed. And the gentleman went there and said, though, but he wants to put people from Rotterdam to go to university. But as long as university is seen as building a debt, because that's what it is about now, when people talk about education, when they don't have knowledge of what he can bring, they say, why should I send my kid to university? He's going to build a massive debt for his future. That's what he's going to do. Not sure he's going to get a job behind. Then that's not going to happen. And I think we need to be much more open in terms of the population we bring into science and engineering, and be much more diverse. And that's why science and engineering and academia is not that diverse in this country, just because we lose the opportunity of bringing many more people in. Just because
what I'm going to take from that,
structured, and now education is structured, and now it's so reliant on the wealth and where you live.
So we've got the tools and the ability to communicate this, but we're not really sharing it out. We're leaving too many people behind.
I think so. We're leaving a vast amount of population behind.
Okay, Ati?
Yeah, I mean, I'll sort of pick up on something that Stephen was saying here. And what we have is a tension in a way between, certainly when we talk to Parliament and the media. In many ways, the diversity and the disagreements that scientists have is the strength, and it's what takes us forward. But it is difficult to take that dynamic and then work with government and media, where the simplicity of message is often what they're after. And actually, I know many politicians, when they work with the scientific community, are thinking, God, I've got so many different signals coming. Which is the right signal? So we have to find a way of being able to get the signal that is most pertinent through. And I'll give you an example of this. When I worked for EPSRC, we were successful in getting a big slug of money. I won't say what in. And that money was invested. And the Treasury were delighted. We had a load of press announcements about this. But then what happened was a load of people in the scientific community were moaning about the process by which that happened. So you had this thing where everybody wants more money into science, but then you're not giving Treasury much of an argument for it if all they see is the scientific community moaning about that money coming into science.
Could that moaning not be seen as a discourse, as a kind of discussion?
I don't think it was seen that way in Treasury, no.
Okay. All right, so it is final thoughts time, and it is also, you know, we can only talk about a certain number of things, and maybe we've missed some things, so if you think there's other things that we haven't touched on, could maybe just mention it, maybe we can do it in the next one, but yeah, let's get these final thoughts, you know.
Just from an industrial point of view, we mentioned Industry 4.0, and not just inspiring young people, but in fact the topics that they're going to choose. And my real worry from where I sit, I have an organization which is across the world. I have engineering centers everywhere. And what I see is robotics, automation and control, data analytics, artificial intelligence. Not only do young people have to be inspired, but our systems, our teaching in the schools and the universities have to shift really quickly now. Everything's about to change in every industry in terms of the level of automation and control and data analytics. And I'm not sure that we've quite got the pace yet to actually respond to that. And I think our young people need to be part of that change, which is coming very, very quickly.
A bit more flexible, a bit faster, and a bit more reactive.
Other countries are going a bit faster, in my view.
Okay, all right. Rachel?
So my point is really picking up on the point there is that we are leaving people behind, and I think it's a kind of, I don't think we're really disagreeing with each other, Richard and I, but I think there are people out there who we're not reaching, and we need to reach those and explain to them how important engineering is, and that engineering is very diverse, and that they should be part of it. And I don't know quite how, I'm not sure there's quite enough of us, or quite enough of us are going out and doing this, and we need to get more people going out and doing this too, and making sure we don't leave these people behind.
But Rachel, just hang on a sec, because you're saying we're not doing it, but then at the very beginning you're saying that's what you do. So you're doing it.
But I do it, but I can't go to very many. It's only me, and I have a job to do, which is, you know, a day job, which doesn't include that bit. I do it because I'm passionate about doing it, and a lot of us do that, but it's not part of our day job. Maybe it should be part of our day job. Maybe we need to change that.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just say very quickly, which is that I think that whether we all agree or not agree on the different points we've raised today, I think the most important thing is that we are a community who are passionate about doing something about it. And one of the things we need to do is act together. He's saying this. We have to support each other. We have to encourage each other, and hopefully that is one of the things we've been doing today. And I think more of this, please.
Okay. Richard?
Well, I agree. I think you know, there's a huge. I think the situation has changed greatly in the last 10 years. I know it may not be actually in our job description, but I think it's much more expected of academics, and it's much more.
I mean, should it be more of the job description? Should that be part of just what scientists and engineers do?
Yeah, it should be. I mean, yeah, and now we're getting to boring things like what's in the promotion criteria, but you know, that's the stuff it should make. It should be in there. It should be part of people's jobs, and I think it is more than it was. So I want to be positive about that.
We're getting there. Yeah. Okay. Tom?
So I think for me the big takeaway is actually your starting point. It's about diversity. And it's about demographic diversity, it's about ethnic diversity, it's about gender diversity, but it's actually about diversity. I mean, I think our communications, we often talk about communications with Parliament, communications with a particular small grouping of people. I think the challenge is the relevance to all of science and kind of embracing that. And that means us all going out of our comfort zones and all going out to talk to people and talk in ways and areas we wouldn't naturally do. And I think that's going to be the hardest journey for us. I actually think the last 10 years have cracked talking to Parliament, I think the next phase is the phase of of inspiring all the people that wouldn't naturally see a scientist. I mean, I grew up in the East End of Glasgow. I grew up in an area which is, and that joke I made at the beginning about the only thing I can talk to my dad about now is Celtic. It's not about the £4.7 billion that I'm involved in distributing to create wealth and the jobs that he's benefiting from. That's not that's not the conversation I have. It's about why we can't buy a striker. But the relevance of the conversation in those areas are the things that will shape the country and shape us going forward.
You could, I guess, there's a lot of technology in football, goal line technology.
Anyway,
that's another subject.
But with my nephew, we do have a debate about data analysis, but that's a different conversation.
Okay. Paul, do you want a final thought?
Yeah, I think the challenge of attracting and inspiring the next generation is as big as retaining those people. And I think we all have to work together to be able to achieve that. You know, industries small and big have to work together, as well as educational institutions, because, like we've heard today, you know, there's some enormous challenges in terms of how working environments are going to change with the onset of automation and various other things.
Is that happening? Are we working together more, do you think? Is it starting to happen?
You see it in pockets. I don't think it's a sort of, you know,
an overall
strategy in terms of the UK's position. But I think if we can start to set those examples, then hopefully other industries, you know, big and small, will follow.
Okay. Jandy?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this panel today. We've talked about science, we've talked a little bit about communicating science, and it'd be good to explore those themes in another session. Communicating, the other side to communicating is listening, so that's my final point, just that when you're communicating, think about who it's to and how they're going to perceive what you're saying, and if we don't listen, then we don't know.
Have you listened, and what have you heard? I mean, it'd be interesting to you know, what do you pick up when you listen? I think that's a really interesting point, and certainly in my job, you have to listen a lot. I mean, have you heard anything from listening that might be...
I suppose that I sense some frustration. I mean, I think there's frustration that in spite of all this stuff happening, it's still, I feel like I've heard this conversation before, and that in itself tells me something.
Has it changed at all, or is it the same conversation?
There's more being done. And we've got young people coming up and taking all this initiative. Maybe it's a recognition that it takes longer than we've given it. You know, as long as the people in power were educated, 30, 40 years ago, this is a conversation that's going to take decades, and things are not going to change overnight. And there are always more voices to listen to. So.
Okay, great stuff. Anyone else want a final thought? It's your chance. Okay,
A well-informed public will make good decisions and choices. The secret is to inform the public well. I think that's key to all of this, really.
Okay. Anyone else want a final thought? The final, very, very quick one.
In terms of then informing the public well, I think we need to tell the human stories of all the stuff that we do, rather than just saying we do all this data science, but why does it actually matter to the person on the ground? And I think that's the final thing that I want to say. Okay.
Anyone can trump that? No? Okay, well, I mean, I think we need to give ourselves a big round of applause. So much from that. And thanks to everyone that's taken part.
And thanks to you, Mikey, for chairing it. That was good. I'm sure we all appreciated that. I don't think we've ever seen this before. Hopefully we'll see more of it.
Yeah, I mean, and let's keep this conversation as well, and on social media and all the other platforms, and hopefully there will be something stimulating, and we will make some progress in this world. Thank you, everyone.